Greetings, peace and blessings to you, your family, and loved ones. My name is Nana Bakine, and I have a lot of questions about what is happening in our world today. I just want to share with you some of my questions and get your responses. These videos are simply opinion pieces. I just have a lot of questions. Thanks to all my subscribers who stop by, and to new visitors, be sure to subscribe. The topic of today's video is Black Lives, All Lives Matter, and canceling Aunt Jemima. As the steam engine rolls out and the cry of alarm is hoisted against racial and social injustice, something seems to be missing from the dialogue. On the one hand, the Black Lives Matter movement is flagged with the comment, "All lives matter." All lives matter to the point that Obama penned an executive order that blue lives matter as well after the series of deaths of police officers in their line of duty. So now we have another color to add to the mix of lives that matter. People are asked to stand for the color of the lives and make a certain statement about changing how these lives are treated. In this video, I want to talk about all lives, and I want to ask the question, when do all lives not matter? In other words, as much as we see these signs going up and protests happening around the world, how is it that the lens of those who are living on this planet can be so narrow and skewed that they miss the hypocrisy of it all? What am I getting at here? Well, I'm getting at the unauthenticity of the outcry for whatever color of the life we are currently being smothered with. What is the nature of the hypocrisy I speak of, you may ask? The hypocrisy I speak of today has two prongs. One is the death penalty, and the other is war. How many times do we say Black Lives Matter or All Lives Matter, and in the same breath call for the chair for someone who took a life, whomever that someone may be? How often have these radicalized groups of protesters and opinion makers followed their All Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter rhetoric with ban the death penalty? You see, we as humans can come almost full circle and still miss the mark. We miss our own doublespeak, which is quite appropriate for the predator class, who will find enjoyment in the divide and conquer strategy, polarizing the masses while knowingly understand that the masses don't really mean Black lives or all lives matter. For if they did, then they would take a more global look at the prevailing culture to see that no life really matters to those who run this world. And on a small scale, Black lives or all lives only in the moment and for specific purposes. Indeed, they would certainly rally around the death of a murderer, encourage revenge or vengeance to anyone who murdered their loved one. It struck me to see the call for frying the police who murdered George Floyd. How is that a resolution, especially after saying Black lives, all lives matter? Taking a look at the crime and punishment scenario, we live among one another as human beings with little regard to how punishment can ruin a life, but yet feel justified in that punishment because that life did something we deem criminal or wrong. We fill our prisons with millions of lives, and we do not say their lives matter. How deep and pervasive is this movement when we do not include the systemic destruction of lives on a daily basis, vis-a-vis poverty, poor education, poor health care, etc.? The beast is humongous, and it needs plenty of fear and vengeance to keep it alive. By muddying the waters, it keeps humanity at each other's throat about small issues that do little or nothing to change the status quo. How does killing another human being who killed someone benefit the prevailing society overall, or any individual family? They said that Gandhi said, and I'm not too sure he even said it, but let me just quote, "An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth will leave the world blind and toothless." Change needs to go deep down into the fiber of the human construct. If a life matters, whatever the color, then why does humanity allow, condone, and support wars when innocent lives of many ethnicities are lost? The average human is more concerned with his immediate needs and takes not into account the needs of those 7,000 miles away. Yet, those needs may be the needs of human beings of all ethnicities. Yet, this average human being will march and protest, saying an injustice to one is an injustice to all, and not move forward with an anti-war agenda. If Black lives and all lives matter, why are these protesters voting for warmongering politicians who live off the carnage of the human species? Is the cover over their eyes so thick that they cannot see the contradiction nor the hypocrisy? I ask this question because Black lives cover a wide spectrum of human beings. Human beings who have suffered under oppressive situations around the world. I ask this question because the qualifying retort of all lives matter still does not take into account the suffering and oppressive situations going on around the world to all ethnicities. When we narrow our focus, we only change a portion of the problem, or let's say we put a band-aid on cancer. We are not dealing with man's inhumanity to man across the broader, more pervasive perspective. Therefore, the cry of alarm will only travel a short distance and keep the prevailing society moving forward, making the most overt statement of all. No lives really matter. I could get into a long list of the ways that lives are destroyed on this planet, but suffice it to say that if there is a kernel of sincerity in this movement, then we will see a major change in how societies around the world function and in how human beings treat human beings. Folks are coming out with the banner of anti-racism and social justice, etc., and missing the true essence of what it really means. They make quick adjustments, claims to forestall the momentary ire of the masses. I say to PepsiCo, leave Aunt Jemima alone. That doesn't fix anything. Go deeper, get historical context, and share that, improve that. Add a caveat on the box. Tell the story. Canceling the product will have no significant impact. I protest this change. What the ever-living fuck is happening to this world? All of a sudden it's racist? Wait till they start looking into fairy tales and Walt Disney. Now they took the rag off her head, they gave her some nice curls, and now they just want to take her face off altogether and change the labeling? This is going a bit too far with this whole social justice BS. It's so superficial and again does not speak or even point to the systemic racism that is pervasive within the company itself. How about changing some of those hiring practices? How about giving more people of color a say in what goes on around there? How about making sure that Black History Month is extended to include the entire year? How about having Black History Month programs at all of your corporate offices? And for a slight, shameless plug, how about inviting the Voices of Africa to perform at your annual Black History Month programs? And how about not supporting warmongering politicians with your donations to their campaigns? How about disbanding the death penalty? Some of this stuff is historical and needs to be addressed in its completeness. I never knew the story till now, and that's a good thing that it has come up now. Why can't you just tell the story and let folks decide if they want to purchase the product or not? By now, we have probably all heard the news that Aunt Jemima will lose her face and brand on all the Quaker Oats products that featured her face. So let's go to our first article that tells us the story. Aunt Jemima brand to remove image from packaging. Quoting from the Chicago, June 17, 2020. PR Newswire. Quote, Aunt Jemima, one of the longtime brands of the Quaker Oats Company, a subsidiary of PepsiCo Incorporated, today announced it will remove the image of Aunt Jemima from its packaging and change the name of the brand. Packaging changes without the Aunt Jemima image will begin to appear throughout the quarter 4 of 2020. The name change will be announced at the later date and will quickly follow the first phase of packaging changes. Quote, as we work to make progress towards racial equality through several initiatives, we also must take a hard look at our portfolio of brands and ensure they reflect our values and meet our customers' expectations, said Kristen Kroppel, Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer, Quaker Foods North America. Quote, we recognize Aunt Jemima's origins are based on a racial stereotype. While work has been done over the years to update the brand in a manner intended to be appropriate and respectful, we realize those changes are not enough. End quote. Continuing with the article, quote, a time for change. In addition to the changes on Aunt Jemima, PepsiCo Company is committed to making significant change for its people, its business, and the communities in which we live and work. Yesterday, PepsiCo Chairman and CEO Raymond LaGuarta announced the next step in PepsiCo's journey for racial equality. A more than $400 million set of initiatives over 5 years to uplift Black communities and increase Black representation at PepsiCo. These initiatives comprise a holistic effort for PepsiCo to walk the talk of a leading corporation and help address the need for systemic change. The activities focus on 3 pillars: people, business, and communities. More details can be found at https://www.pepsico.com/racial-equality-journey. Before we get our tissues out for this heartfelt ripping at the sensibilities oration of what Quaker Oats PepsiCo sees as a need to remove Aunt Jemima, let's go for a little historical context and look at this article from Wikipedia. Now, don't give me the blues about Wikipedia. I was beginning to get confused over who Aunt Jemima was, as the names were coming up for more than one person. So Wikipedia helped me make some sense of it. So they get a shout out just this one time. From Wikipedia, we read, Aunt Jemima is a brand of pancake mix, syrup, and other breakfast foods. The Aunt Jemima pancake mix debuted in 1889, the first ready mix. By 1915, it had become one of the most recognized brands in U.S. history and changed U.S. trademark law. Currently owned by Quaker Oats Company of Chicago, now a subsidiary of PepsiCo. The Aunt Jemima character is based on the enslaved Mammy archetype. On June 17, 2020, following the killing of George Floyd and subsequent protests, Quaker Oats announced that the Aunt Jemima brand would be rebranded to make progress toward racial equality. St. Joseph Gazette editor Chris L. Rutt of St. Joseph, Missouri, and his friend Charles G. Underwood bought a flour mill in 1888. Rutt and Underwood's Pearl Milling Company faced a glutted flour market. After experimenting, they sold their excess flour as a pancake mix in paper bags with a generic label, self-rising pancake flour, later dubbed the first ready mix. To distinguish their pancake mix in the autumn of 1889, Rutt appropriated the Aunt Jemima name from lithographed posters seen at a vaudeville house in St. Joseph, Missouri. Continuing. However, Rutt and Underwood could not raise enough capital and quickly ran out of money. They sold their company to Randolph Tourette Davis Milling Company, also in St. Joseph, Missouri, in 1890. Then the largest flouring mill on the Missouri River, having an established reputation with wholesale and retail grocers throughout the Missouri Valley. Davis improved the flour and texture of the product by adding rice flour and corn sugar, and simplified the ready mix by adding powdered milk. Only water was needed to prepare the batter. The Davis Milling Company was renamed Aunt Jemima Mills in February 1914. By 1915, the Aunt Jemima brand was so well recognized that it changed trademark infringement precedent, the Aunt Jemima Doctrine. The Quaker Oats Company purchased the Aunt Jemima Mills Company in 1926 and formally registered the Aunt Jemima trademark in April of 1937. It remains one of the longest continuing running logos and trademarks in the history of American advertising. Quaker Oats introduced Aunt Jemima syrup in 1966. This was followed by Aunt Jemima Butter Light syrup in 1985 and Butter Rich syrup in 1991. Aunt Jemima frozen foods were licensed out to Aurora Foods in 1996, which was absorbed into Pinnacle Foods Corporation in 2004. Character. Aunt Jemima is based on a common enslaved mammy archetype, a plump black woman wearing a headscarf who is a devoted and submissive servant. Her skin is dark and dewy with a pearly white smile. Although depictions vary over time, they are similar to the common attire and physical features of mammy characters throughout history. The term aunt in this context was a Southern form of address used with older enslaved peoples. They were denied use of courtesy titles. A character named Aunt Jemima appeared on the stage in Washington, D.C. as early as 1864. Rutt's inspiration for Aunt Jemima was Billy Kirstan's American-style minstrelly vaudeville song, Old Aunt Jemima, written in 1875. Rutt reportedly saw a minstrel show featuring the Old Aunt Jemima song in the fall of 1889, presented by blackface performers identified by Arthur F. Marquette as Baker and Farrell. Marquette recounts that the actor playing Aunt Jemima wore an apron and kerchief. Let me add here that it appears from what is reported in this article called Aunt Jemima, It Was Never About Pancakes, written in the blackexcellence.com website, and I quote, "The inspiration for Aunt Jemima came specifically from the song Old Aunt Jemima, written by a black performer named Billy Kirstans in 1875. It was a staple of the minstrel circuit. The song was based on a song sung by slave hands, Old Aunt Jemima, and was performed by men in blackface. One of the men depicted Aunt Jemima, a slave mammy of the plantation South. Interestingly enough, back in the vaudeville days, men were the only characters. Neither women or Africans were allowed to perform in the minstrel circuit. Thus, the blackface was utilized to represent the Africans. And some people still find blackface as insulting to African Americans to this very day. In fact, while viewing posts on Minds.com, another social media platform that I am a part of, I found this posting referencing Robert Downey Jr. in a movie called Tropic Thunder. Robert Downey Jr. is a Caucasian man who played his role in Tropic Thunder as an African American. He is, in fact, in dark complected makeup. The comment on Twitter says, "Wait, why did Robert Downey Jr. get a pass for doing blackface in a full-length feature film? And why am I just now finding out about it? A response is, I can't believe RDJ played blackface. Him acting as a black male is racist, and I don't see how you can defend him for it. We need to cancel him immediately. And one of the comments later said, but the Wayans brothers played two white females in White Chicks. Robert Downey played a black man in Tropic Thunder. So what's the problem? Interesting. What I found most interesting was the number of models who portrayed Aunt Jemima in ads, on the radio, and even at the 1933 World's Fair and various other venues. Continuing with the article on Wikipedia, performers. The African American Registry of the United States suggests Nancy Green and other individuals who played the caricature of Aunt Jemima should be celebrated in lieu of what has been widely condemned as a stereotypical and racist brand image. On Nancy Green's birthday, November 17, the registry wrote, "We celebrate the birth of Nancy Green in 1834. She was a black storyteller and one of the first black corporate models in the United States." Continuing, Nancy Green was the first spokesperson hired by R.T. Davis Milling Company for the Aunt Jemima pancake mix. Green was born a slave in Montgomery County, Kentucky. Dressed as Aunt Jemima, Green appeared at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, Illinois, beside the world's largest flour barrel. It was 24 feet high, where she operated a pancake cooking display, sang songs, and told romanticized stories about the Old South, a happy place for blacks and whites alike. She appeared at country fairs, flea markets, food shows, and local grocery stores. Her arrival heralded by large billboards featuring the caption, "I's in town, honey." Following Green's work as Aunt Jemima, the company hired a few dozen actors to portray the roles, often assigned regionally. Some were relatively well known, and I will list a few that were mentioned in this Wikipedia article. Lillian Richard was hired to portray Aunt Jemima in 1925 and remained in the role for 23 years. Anna Robinson was hired to play Aunt Jemima at the 1933 Century of Progress Chicago's World's Fair. Anna Short Harrington began her career as Aunt Jemima in 1935. Edith Wilson became the face of Aunt Jemima on radio, television, and in personal appearances from 1948 to 1966. Rosie Lee Moore Hall portrayed the role of Aunt Jemima from 1950 to 1967. Eileen Lewis portrayed Aunt Jemima in 1955 at a restaurant at the same name at Disneyland, posing for pictures with visitors. Ethel Ernestine Harper worked as a traveling Aunt Jemima, giving presentations at schools, churches, and other organizations during the 50s in person, in print, and in media. Now, this is all very interesting. How many impersonators do we have nowadays? Michael Jackson impersonators, Elvis Presley impersonators. I'm wondering if this idea became popular because of what Aunt Jemima's role models were doing back in the early 1900s to the mid 1900s. So let's take a look at a few headlines. The links will be in the blog post in the description below for those who wish to read the articles in total. PepsiCo announces a more than $400 million initiative over 5 years to lift up black communities and black representation. Nancy Green, the original Aunt Jemima. Only racist people want Aunt Jemima canceled. Aunt Jemima was a real person, but the brand was never black owned. What happened? Aunt Jemima and the Lost Cause. Aunt Jemima brand to change name and remove image from packaging due to racial stereotype. Last face of Aunt Jemima brand became first black history teacher in Morristown. Aunt Jemima, it was never about pancakes. Pancake flap, Aunt Jemima heirs seek dough. Aunt Jemima's logo has changed 6 times, and its history is rooted in racial stereotypes and slavery. Check out how the brand started and evolved over 130 years. A lesson in marketing magic, the history of Aunt Jemima. The fight to preserve the legacy of Nancy Green, the Chicago woman who played the original Aunt Jemima. Can we please finally get rid of Aunt Jemima? At age 100, a new Aunt Jemima. Aunt Jemima's logo has changed 6 times, and its history is rooted in racial stereotypes and slavery. Check out how the brand started over 130 years. Old Time Radio, OTR, Aunt Jemima, Variety. Reflections on the South and popular culture. The Syracuse resident that portrayed Aunt Jemima and the racist history of the character. Great-grandson of Syracuse Aunt Jemima angry at her removal. This is an injustice. All hail to the popular black model and former slave who was in everybody's home in the 1890s as Aunt Jemima. Little known black history fact, the history of Aunt Jemima. Aunt Jemima relatives suing Pancake Company for $2 billion citing century-old agreement. The many faces of Aunt Jemima. 8 African American women who portrayed Aunt Jemima. Living trademarks, the women behind the faces of Aunt Jemima. Family of women who portrayed Aunt Jemima opposes move to change brand. Aunt Jemima was a real person, but the brand was never black owned. What happened? Aunt Jemima and the Lost Cause. This is just a short listing of the many articles I have read in preparation for this video. I've done a tremendous amount of research on this thing. It had my head spinning, but I still stand that they should leave it alone. It doesn't mean they are no longer racist. Folks were talking about changing it back in the 50s and 60s, and now, all of a sudden, they realize it has racial, stereotypical overtones? Give me a break. What was really racist was the fact that none of the models were compensated for their work. And when their families sued, they lost the court case. Remember how they copyright the Happy Birthday song? The issue is that time and time again, they co-opt and patent a product that was not their own. Although Nancy Green was not the originator of the recipe, her face and the face of those who followed became the brand. And that's my point. Stop with the superficial, I ain't gonna be a racist no more, and give credit where it's due. If they remove her, so they will remove the history and the impact on society, not to mention the millions of dollars that marketing scheme made General Foods, Quaker Oats, and PepsiCo. Again, I must say that many of these folks who are stepping up and taking responsibility are making superficial gestures. They are not making significant changes that will change the face of systemic racism or social injustice. They are simply flapping their lips to get a clap or two, because to me, if they were really sincere, they would have been at the forefront of this movement 500 years ago, or at least 20 years ago. That's my take on it, and I'm sticking with it. Change will take time, but heck, we need to focus on the real problems in order to make real change. Window dressing in 2020 will not make the grade. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And be sure to subscribe and press the like button. Peace and blessings to you, your family, and loved ones.
Aunt Jemima!
Good morning, good morning, good morning, folks.
That, as you may have guessed, is your old friend Aunt Jemima.
And I'm mighty happy, too, folks, because this morning, Mr. Lion is going to do most of the talking.
I am? Well, what am I going to talk about, Aunt Jemima?
Why, this is your day to talk about waffles, Mr. Lion, about crispy golden brown Aunt Jemima waffles.